Hello and welcome to another video review from AVForums. I'm Phil Hinton and I've been the site editor since 2003. I'm also a fully trained and qualified THX and ISF professional calibrator with 18 years of experience. In today's video we have our review of the Samsung AU9000 LED LCD TV. Before we talk about the performance of the Samsung, if you like our reviews and want to see more of them while supporting our channel, then please like and subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell to be informed every time we upload new video content. You can also find a link to our Patreon in the video description, and also don't forget to check out the TV forums at Europe's largest AV community on AVForums to see what owners of this TV think about it after normal use in their own home. We publish our in-depth TV reviews, which include measurements and calibration results first on AVForums, usually a while before our YouTube videos, so make sure you head over to check them out as they do contain even more in-depth calibration details and testing. We reviewed the Samsung AU9000 in November 2021. The AU9000 is part of Samsung's Crystal UHD range that sits just below the more premium QLED range. We're reviewing the 50-inch model here, which features an edge-lit 4K 8-bit plus FCR VA panel on a bezel-less design with HDR10+, HLG and HDR10 high dynamic range support, but there is no Dolby Vision. The picture processing is handled by the Samsung Crystal Processor 4K, providing upscaling and motion processing, along with the dynamic Crystal Color feature, which provides a wider colour gamut performance. The Samsung AU9000 is not an enthusiast's TV for critical movie viewing in a dark room, and it never pretends to be. It's a very good quality everyday living room workhorse with a decent image for bright room viewing that gets fairly accurate out of the box. It has an excellent smart TV system and gaming features such as ALLM, VRR and low input lag of 10.9 milliseconds, which will keep most of the competitive gamers happy. It does struggle with HDR image brightness, and of course there's no Dolby Vision on board, but it also comes in at a very competitive price point where it offers decent value for money, and it gets a recommendation if you're looking for such a screen. As we can see in the Grayscale chart, the Samsung is not quite as accurate as it should be in filmmaker mode, with a deficit of red energy and a slight increase in green and blue throughout the range. We also have an issue with the gamma, which follows an S-curve instead of the BT1886 standard, which means that the image is too dark in the shadows and too bright in the highlights. It gives the image a false sense of pop, and as a result our delta E errors are higher than the visible threshold of 3, as we can see these errors within TV and film content we watch on the TV. Moving to Rec 709 colour gamut, and the results here are a lot more accurate, with just a few small issues with red undersaturation and green hue errors, but these are under the visible threshold with no noticeable effect on TV and film content we viewed. So overall, as an out-of-the-box preset, we have seen much better from filmmaker mode on competing TVs, and we would encourage Samsung to make sure it adds in more accuracy going forward. Looking at the grayscale, we were able to flatten out the scale as the image gets brighter and improve the out-of-the-box results slightly. However, the controls are coarse, which means that we were unable to get the results perfectly flat as we would like. We were also unable to correct the S-curve nature of the gamma response, which means that our delta E errors did get above the visible threshold of 3 around the mid-brightness levels. The Rec 709 colour gamut was also calibrated as well as we could with the given controls, and this was done for 75% saturation and below, with a few errors remaining at 100%, but these are not as important as the lower saturation results, which make up the vast majority of the image quality. Overall, we managed to get the AU9000 looking fairly accurate following calibration. We measured the HDR performance in the Filmmaker HDR mode, which aims to tone map content correctly to the ST2084 PQ EOTF standard and attempts to produce a wide colour gamut performance towards BT 2020 standards. As with most LED LCD TVs at this price point, the peak brightness is not very bright, and being an edge lit display, and this also impacted in terms of total peak brightness. Using our standard testing of measuring various screen window sizes, we've found that the peak brightness of the AU9000 was around 275 nits across all window sizes. This is to be expected from a set at this price point. With an ANSI measured black level of 0.071 nits, we get an on-off contrast of 3878 to 1. The PQ EOTF tracking to ST2084 was decent given the lack of peak brightness, with a tone map that rolled off gently from around 80 nits to the peak of 275 nits. This helped to retain some details in the peak highlights, but those highlights were far from being dynamic or bright on this Samsung. The brightness and performance on offer were only slightly brighter than normal SDR content. The Samsung AU9000 also makes a decent stab at wide colour, with a gamut that's not quite wide enough to meet the DCI-P3 coverage, but the saturation points are close to where they should be within a reduced gamut size. We measured BT2020 at 63% XY and 69% UV, with P3 coming in at 87% XY and 92% UV. To start, I think it's important to cover the expectations on image quality and the use cases for the Samsung AU9000. It's not a TV for critical film or HDR viewing due to the inherent limitations of the TV and the LED LCD technology being used. It's simply not bright enough to provide HDR with full dynamic range, and the colour performance is not quite wide enough compared to the higher end models. But once you're aware and accept these limitations, we can assess the AU9000 fairly. Screen uniformity is not perfect, with this being an edge-lit TV, and it is a mixed bag to be honest. With slightly brighter edges and a darker centre when viewing test slides from 5% to 100% brightness. With 5% we have lighter edges visible, especially towards the bottom of the panel. We also have issues with clouding across the screen, and this is particularly visible in a 50% brightness pattern, where we can clearly see an uneven uniformity to the panel and backlight. We also noted some dirty screen effect, which was most noticeable when watching panning shots over areas of the same colour, like a football pitch or the sky. Black levels are decent on the AU9000 when watching in a bright, well-lit living room, but if you look closely, you do start to notice a degree of black crush in the image. This is particularly noticeable in darker scenes, such as the beginning of John Wick Chapter 3, where the walls and surroundings of a side street have details missing in the shadows that should be visible. When watching in completely dark surroundings, the black levels are more dark navy in colour due to the lack of contrast and the limitations of the technology. Like most LED LCD TVs at this price point, the Samsung AU9000 is best suited to bright surroundings, where its image quality stands up to scrutiny better than in dim surroundings. SDR picture quality in the filmmaker mode and calibrated settings is good, with excellent colour tones and a natural look to skin tones. Detail is present and correct, with a nice image sharpness and good motion when set correctly for 24 frames per second. Film images have a nice filmic look with certain scenes, but watching with some ambient lighting is recommended to get the best out of the black levels and panel brightness. There is a pop to images thanks to that S-curve in the gamma response for SDR content, but this does come at the expense of shadow details thanks to black crush. For a second screen or gaming TV, these issues will not affect the enjoyment for most users. This is not, after all, a TV for critical movie watching. Used in a well-lit living room, the small issues we have with the TV limitations are much less obvious, with that pop to the image likely to please many of the end users not looking for complete image accuracy. HDR is a much tougher nut to crack when you are struggling for brightness, which is the case here with the AU9000. Like many other screens at this market level, the panel is just not bright enough to display HDR with any kind of dynamic range or peak highlight detail. Colours do look good with HDR content, and the tone mapping also helps pull out some peak details and some dynamics to the image, but it's not getting anywhere close to any of the OLEDs or premium QLED TVs for dynamic range or wide colour gamut performance, but you shouldn't expect that at this price point. It plays back HDR content with a slightly brighter image than SDR, but it is limited due to the technology and that price point. However, once again, if you're watching in a bright living room and are not concerned with image accuracy and you just want a nice colourful image, the Samsung AU9000 will certainly give you that with decent motion as well. The design of the AU9000 is very good for a value option with very good sturdy build quality and decent plastics. The bezel-less design features a gunmetal style finish to the panel edges and the stands, and while plastic, it's also sturdy enough to hold the TV upright without any problems. The feet also have rows within the plastic to the rear which you can push cables into for cable management. Around the back of the panel, we also have the connections which are sideways and rearwards facing. Sideways we have two USB 2.0 ports, a LAN and two HDMI 2.0B slots with an RF antenna to the bottom of the connection section and a CI slot. Rearwards facing, we have a further HDMI 2.0B port and a digital audio output. The AU9000 ships with two remote controls, with a small mini remote in black for everyday use, with a larger traditional remote control full of buttons, with access to more options through the direct button presses. Both are plastic but sturdy with a nice feel in the hand, no matter which one you choose to use. To find out more about the Samsung AU9000, head over to AVForums.com where you can read the full in-depth review, or you can follow the link in the description. Thanks for watching.